everyone, and welcome back. Today we're talking about Mare of Easttown episode 5, Illusions, and this was a really good episode. Poor Colin, he definitely did not deserve that. I mean, that was harsh, but the whole episode was, I guess, preparing us for his death. Second, Dylan, just when we were feeling bad for him, he pretty much turned out to be exactly who we thought he was. And I really liked this episode. We wrapped up that kidnapper storyline, and we're getting very close to figuring out what happened to Aaron on the night of her murder. So the episode starts off during a powder outage, and we get like a general overview of what all the other families are doing. And I'm starting to understand the purpose of Frank and Siobhan and Mare's family, because Mare's family, like, they've invested us a lot of time. And towards the end of this episode, I kind of understood why. Frank and Siobhan are having a conversation about family, and it seems like Frank and his wife are not doing that well. Like, these things, the grass might not be greener. And he's like, girl, I really should ask you about yourself more often. Like, you seem super strong. I just assume that you're okay. And she's like, yeah. And of course, she's working on this documentary about her brother, and she hasn't told anybody, right? Because we see that Mare goes into her room and she kind of stumbles upon it, and she's looking at it like she doesn't say anything, but she's shocked. So everybody has their own way of dealing with grief. And this conversation is helped by the fact that, like, during Mare's therapy sessions, and Mare's therapy sessions have been fun. Like, we haven't seen a lot of them, but it seems like she's taking it seriously, and it is kind of helping her open up and trust people more. And one of the things that comes up in this therapy session is the fact that her father committed suicide, and that she was very worried about her stepson because of her son. And all the images she has of her son is of him being a drug addict and being very angry with her. Like, she doesn't really have the positive memories when she looks back on him. She only thinks about the negative. So when she saw Siobhan's video, like, she was kind of triggered because she kind of remembers, hey, like, this kid did love me at one point. But it's hard to focus on the positive when so many negative things have happened. And so she was worried about generational depression and whether or not this gets passed down. And as she's talking about it, it kind of makes sense, because she mentions the fact that her father killed himself because she wasn't good enough. And that's why she became a cop, and that's why she did half of what she's doing. And she didn't want to burden anyone. Like, she didn't really talk about it. She never really opened up to anyone about how she felt, because that's just who she is, right? So she takes other people's crap, but she doesn't really, she doesn't want to bother anybody. And that's a very, self-destructive thing to do, as the therapist was trying to tell her. But this talk of generational depression is very accurate when it comes to her family, because, again, nobody seems to be talking about anything. And there's this added issue of the fact that she's not working. Again, she's suspended. I don't know why she's still on the case. She needs something to do. Granted, she's a good detective. There's a bunch of cases that she struggled to solve in her own community. And I don't know if this makes matters worse, but it seems like the people around her, her so-called best friends, I mean, with friends like these, who needs enemies, have been up to no good. So one of the families we get an overview of is Lori and her husband. And there's this overview of Lori's husband basically telling their son, like, hey, you need to keep this secret. Like, please don't tell anybody. And we don't know what he's referring to. And this manifests because it's really stressing this kid out. And this kid starts beating people up at school. And it seems like Lori's husband cheats. And she was worried that he was cheating on her with the same girl, whatever that means. And so, that was one thing. And then the second weird thing that happens is during this, like, get-together between Mare, Lori, Billy, and her husband. And Lori kind of brings up the fact that Aaron's father called them, and he wants them to take in the baby, since the baby has nowhere to go, and that's something they're considering. And we find out about Aaron's background and her mother and just how they were in the town. And Lori's husband is a bit of a creeper, because he was sitting back being like, Aaron would never talk about this. That's just not how she was. And I was like, how do you know how Aaron was? I get they were cordial and they were helping her out maybe, but that just seemed like he was really looking back at her like he remembered things about her that, seemed a little too personal. The second bomb that dropped was with this guy, Billy. Like, I knew he was shady from the minute I saw him. So it seems like Aaron had stayed with him for a period of months. And Lori really emphasized that. She's like, didn't she stay with you for months? And Mare is sitting there like, who are these people? Like, and she seemed really shocked, right? Because she's looking around the room and they're all drinking alcohol, and she's looking at the bottle that's sitting on the table. And I believe, you know, she wants to find out who Aaron's baby daddy is. That's a question that has yet to be answered. And so I don't know what Mare did with these beer bottles, but there's a lot of DNA tests that need to be made. And so that was, again, like, this was happening underneath her nose and she didn't know about it. And so just as you're kind of suspecting these people, another bomb drops. So of course Dylan was involved. And the contrast between Dylan now and at the start of the season is quite stark, because in the beginning I really thought he was, I'm just going to say, like a simp. Like, he just seemed like somebody who did not wear the pants in the house. His girlfriend Brianna seemed to be the aggressor. Like, she seemed to be the one, like, really like the angry person, the one that controls everything. But it seems it's actually the other way around. It's Dylan who orders people around and triggers people. And looking back on that first episode, I did think it's interesting that Brianna found out about Dylan and Aaron because he told her. And I guess he told her in hopes that she would beat her up, because now he's looking like a total sociopath. This conversation between Dylan and Brianna is interesting because, first of all, Brianna was looking hella sympathetic. Next to him, she brings up the fact that on the night of the murder, he was nowhere to be found. So she woke up, she was walking around, and he was nowhere to be found. And she's kind of letting him know this, like, hey, if you let me go, like, I don't know what to tell you. And the interesting thing about their dynamic is she seemed kind of scared of him. And again, this is like a big difference from what we saw in the beginning. And then things just get even more strange when Aaron's best friend Jess meets up with them. So just as we suspected, Aaron's best friend has been hiding things. She's the person who first told us that Frank, Mare's ex, could possibly be the father. That was a lie. Second, she pretty much told the police about Aaron escorting, and she showed them the website and swore, like a best friend should, that she would never sell herself, even though she wanted to. So Aaron was trying to pay for an ear surgery, and this is one of the ways she was trying to do with it. And the third sort of big lie is what she told Mare about the journals. So Mare, being selfish, tried to extract some information from Jess, asking, where is this girl, like, where are her journals? And Jess lied about the location. So these journals were definitely in the room, they were just not in the place she said they were. So Jess, Dylan, and this random other kid get to Aaron's room, they get the journals, and the plan is to burn these journals. And Jess, I guess, was reading one of the journals and she took something out of it for insurance, I believe. I don't know what she took out of the journal, but she was reading one of them, and I guess whatever she was reading triggered her in some way. And to be honest, if I were her, I would have insurance as well, because from what we can see, like, Dylan is the person orchestrating this. Like, it is curious that she would point all these fingers in the wrong direction. And it seems like somebody was telling her what to do, and that somebody was clearly Dylan. And the plot thickens because now we're finding out even more about the night of. So as if that wasn't enough, we find out from the deacon that he was with her on the night of. So one of the biggest suspects was this deacon. And I guess word had gotten around that he had harassed a 14-year-old girl, and he kind of got beat up for it. And so he confessed to Dan that he was with her on the night of her murder. And his logic was she had called him and she asked to be dropped off at another park, and she was hysterical. So it seems like she insisted on being dropped off somewhere, and he agreed to it. He put her bike in his trunk. And so he was feeling guilty. You know, he said he tried desperately to convince her not to go wherever it is she wanted to go, but she was just hysterical, which suggests that whoever she was meeting is someone that she was either very angry with or she knew very deeply, which, you know, I don't see how it can be Dylan at this point. Like, that kid is awful. So it seems like the connection between Aaron and these kidnapped girls has totally disappeared. And we get this sort of scene of these girls in captivity, and one of these girls brings up the fact that there was a third girl with them, and he had gotten her pregnant and disposed of the body. And as you're listening or watching this all play out, it kind of makes sense that this guy flew under the radar, because these girls were selling themselves, they were on drugs, so the police didn't really take their stories or these disappearances all too seriously until now. And Mare is able to interview somebody who escaped, and she kind of directs them towards the van, and she also directs them towards like cigarettes. She says one of the things that struck out about this guy was that he smoked a specific brand of cigarettes that somebody in her family had smoked, so she remembered that, and this would be relevant for the end of the episode. And so I will give it to Mare. Like, I don't know why she's doing these interviews. I don't know why she's doing all this. Like, girl, you should be at home. But she is able to kind of connect the dots. And things get even more promising during this date with Colin and Mare. And Colin and Mare, like, I'll just, a side note, I don't understand their love story. Like, I don't really understand the purpose of it. Like, I think it would have been cool if they were friends or they bonded in some other way, but I'm not feeling the chemistry. Anyways, during this date, she kind of brings up the fact that she had kind of found out about another girl with a similar story, and she was asking for the case files and that this could be really promising. And Colin kind of confronts her and says, hey, why didn't you tell me that you interviewed the deacon? Why are you doing this all by yourself? And she kind of goes off on him and she's like, there was nothing to tell. And the only reason we're not as mad at her is because we know that she didn't want to burden him, and she was just trying to do the work. Like, she likes to work alone. And then Colin says something that, really hurts at the end, because he said, you did that for yourself. You're not here to help anybody else. You're here to help yourself. My mom told me I shouldn't have gone on a date with you. The only reason you're friends with me is to stay close to this case. And Mare, of course, is offended and she leaves. But, listening to that, it's really interesting because there's a lot of decisions that Mare made that actually do hurt them in the end. First, with the journals. So chances are, if she asked Colin to come with her, he probably would have found it. Like, I find it very curious that Mare just believed this kid at face value. Like, yeah, she found a necklace, but you really think this girl was lying to you or telling you the truth? So a lot of what she's doing is, she's a good cop, but you need a second opinion. And a lot of these second opinions can help you see things that you can't see. Like, I think at one point Colin in previous episodes said, is there anybody in this town you don't know? Basically saying, like, you're not seeing clearly, girl. And he called her out, and I respected him for doing that. That conversation was good and bad. Bad for Mare because she just doesn't look interested in anyone. And Colin is trying his best, he's trying to be a team player, but he's kind of going it alone here. And this whole episode, they're kind of setting us up for his death, like, looking back on it, they were really kind of, like, he got a lot of screen time. Like, he was saying things like, I think the biggest indicator that something bad was going to happen was just before he went with Mare. He tells his mother, I've been living carefully or safely my whole life. Look where it's gotten me. And, that line just hits different towards the end of the episode. So we find out that Colin hasn't been 100%. So the case that made him famous, the only reason he was able to solve it was through a PI. So it seems like a private investigator was hired, and this PI had been trying to call him for a long time to put everything together. And he didn't want to, for whatever reason, he didn't want to meet up with this person. And then this private investigator died and left a bunch of files lying around. And so by chance, he decided to look into it. And it turns out, like, this dude had all the pieces that he needed to solve this case, and he pretty much took credit for it. And his logic was he always wanted to do something great in life, and that was kind of his one shot to shine, and he hasn't really been able to do it, which maybe explains why he likes Mare so much, because he sees her as very good at her job, and he kind of has a chip on his shoulder because people see him as an expert, but if people knew the truth, they probably wouldn't rely on him as much. And so thankfully for him, Mare, like, didn't, hold it over his head. And surprisingly, she told him the truth about why she was suspended. And he was just like, what? Like, you are as psychotic as I thought you were. And I was impressed with Mare for kind of opening up that way. And before we get to this crazy scene, let's just get to this kiss. I was not feeling that kiss at all. Like, evanpeters, like, you are good, but there's just no chemistry. Like, they kept doing all these kind of close-ups of their faces, and I'm like, I don't think it's necessary to have a love interest, like, I don't think everything needs to be based on that. Also, what happened to Richard, Guy Pearce's character? Like, they had more chemistry, in my opinion. Like, they seem to have more, like, I guess he's gone. So again, some of this stuff is just not working, and I feel like it kind of cheapens the show a bit, but that's my opinion. Okay, so we get to this house, and Colin and Mare are knocking on this man's door. And there's so many red flags. First of all, Mare does not have a gun. So I don't know why she's going door to door. Like, this seemed like a plot hole in my opinion. Like, they should not have been doing this. And she knows damn well she should not be knocking on doors. As soon as this guy opened the door, you just knew like something bad was happening here. They walk inside, there's like, the place is just a mess. You know, it's just filthy, and the thing that gives it away are these cigarettes. So one of the victims or people that had survived had kind of mentioned the fact that this man smoked a very specific brand of cigarettes. And of course they see the brand of cigarettes, and this whole scene was so messy, right? Because again, Mare doesn't have a gun. These girls who are kidnapped kind of notice that there's somebody in the house, so they're trying to make noise and like, you know, save themselves. And you know, when Colin was shot, I have to say, like, it happened so quickly, and like they just took him out. Like, they just took him out like a dummy. Like, I was like, you know, as soon as this creep was in the kitchen and he was grabbing the gun and putting it in his back, like, something bad was always going to happen. By some stroke of luck, Mare is able to survive. She's able to text for help, thank God for Wi-Fi. And as she's kind of lying there, she kills the man who had kidnapped them, and you know, there's just blood everywhere. And she has this flashback of her son at the beach, the same clip that Siobhan was using in her documentary. And that's how the episode ends. And so the fact that her last memory was of her son, I thought was quite, you know, it was quite sad, because it was her son at a time where he was young, before all this drama happened. And one of the things that plagues her is the fact that she couldn't save him. And now she's looking at her dead partner like, I couldn't really save you either. And so I don't know how this is going to manifest later on. But overall, I thought this was an excellent episode. I even enjoyed the distractions, like with Mare's mother. Like, that whole bit was really hilarious. So I guess the local neighbor had died in a car crash, and her husband had had an affair with Mare's mother. And I really enjoy the interaction between the two of them. And I don't know why, it just fits. It adds like a lightness. See, that's an example of a side story that works. Whereas Siobhan and Frank's, like, it just doesn't work, you know? So if they were more careful or more selective about these sort of sideline or, you know, these other storylines, I think it could actually be like a lot more focused and, you know, less heavy at times. But overall, I thought it was a great episode. I totally enjoyed myself. The pacing was great. And Colin, rest in peace. Like, even if he is alive somehow, to be honest, like, he will be in a coma for the rest of his life. Because, correct me if I'm wrong, like, he shot him square in the face. Like, that's what I saw. Anyways, you guys let me know what you think, and until next time.